Did you know you can support the Technology Show when you shop at Amazon.com? Become a friend of the show by starting your shopping at thetechnologyshow.com/shop. It's Tuesday, October 22nd, 2013, live from the Technology Podcasting Hall in rural Pickens, South Carolina. I'm Matthew T.G.
I am Heath Mulligan.
And I'm Tony Casey. Welcome to the Technology Show, weekly podcast featuring technology, theology, and everything in between. This is episode 222.
What are the odds?
So, as everyone can see, I am not in studio today. I am up here in Chicago. So, Heath, I'm really counting on you to keep everything in line there in the studio and just help Matthew out with the tech stuff anytime you can.
I actually went over and twisted all the knobs on the
thank you for that.
little soundboard. So
I really appreciated that this morning, Heath. You don't even know.
No, and by the way, Tony, your gumball machine's almost out of gum, so pick some up on your way home. Thanks.
Yeah. Part of your contract demand,
That's
right?
exactly right.
So for South Carolina people, I'm a Gamecock fan. You're a Clemson fan. Rough weekend, man.
Next issue. Oh my goodness gracious! Terrible.
So how's your fantasy league going?
Everything in my life is a fantasy. So you win some, you lose some. In one league, I'm doing great. In one league, I'm not doing so great. So it's all.
Right. Well, listen, for me, I'm a Packer fan, and 3 weeks ago, we were 1-2 at the bottom of the division. After this week, we're at the top of the division at 4-2. And so things are looking up, for us Green Bay fans.
You know who I really feel bad for? Colts fans, who the big game Sunday night, Peyton Manning returning to Indianapolis. Denver loses for the first time this season. A great win, not a fluke win not a lucky win for the Colts.
Yeah.
But they lose Reggie Wayne, who's been a receiver there for the past 35 years and is a great player, Hall of Famer. So it's kind of bittersweet.
Yeah, there was some bad injuries this week, for the Packers. Their tight end, Finley, and it ended up in ICU.
Yeah, he had a major spinal injury. They're not going to have to do surgery. But he's moving and good. It might be a career ender for him, but it was not a good weekend to be an ACL in the NFL.
Yeah. Well, who else got an ACL?
Sam Brad. There was probably 4 guys that tore. Cushing for the Texans, Bradford, Reggie Wayne. I'm a nerd for knowing all this, so there you go.
We've always known you're a nerd. Hey, listen, let's talk about the Amazon affiliate stuff.
Okay, so we have been pumping the fact that you can support our show as a listener when you start your Amazon shopping at our website by going to the technologyshow.com/shop. It just kicks you to Amazon, and when you buy something, we get a cut of it. And this week, the big buyers, somebody bought memory cards. We don't know who it was,
nice.
But good gracious, we made between $25 and $30 off of memory card purchases this week, and those are the kind of things that goes a long way to helping us out. So super simple. It really requires just one extra little step.
Yeah.
If you have Amazon bookmarked in your browser, just change the bookmark for us to thetechnologyshow.com/shop, and that's all that there is to it. It helps us when we will be coming up this coming year on buying new equipment for our show, just to keep things state of the art. I guess you'd say state of the art for rural Pickens, South Carolina, I suppose.
That's right, yeah.
But that is fantastic when you do that. Now, we've also got another opportunity that we want to let you know about. We have been working, and I won't name names, but we've been working with a group on some actual sponsorship on getting our show right down here where my hand is, a nice watermark throughout the show for a brand, and we have that available at what we consider to be a very reasonable price. And so if you go to our site, you're going to see kind of in the right-hand side, there's a spot where it says your ad here, and it says sponsorship, or you can just go to the technologyshow.com/sponsor, and there's a whole document there outlining what it looks like to be a sponsor of the show, what that costs, what it entails, and we'd be delighted to bring people on in this to get your brand out in front of our viewers. We have a very interesting demographic, I feel like. So we really believe that there are some brands and companies who we're speaking right to their people. What did you say, Heath? I mean, good gracious.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, let me weigh in here real quick, Tej. So we've been moving ahead on this, and we've moved slowly on this, but right now things are looking up. We anticipate signing a contract this week that's our shows from starting January the 1st through June. 2 of our shows every month are going to be sponsored, but obviously we still have other shows. Let me give you an example. We've got 2 shows coming up, one with Mark Batterson and the other with Mike Cusick. Those are great opportunities for sponsorship. And Matthew, talk just a second about why this is important with podcasting, how an ad kind of lives on.
So I am oh goodness, I am really working hard to give me just a second. Batters on. I wanted to look up and see our last time that we interviewed Mark Batterson. That video has 3,400 views.
Yeah.
That's 3,400 times for your brand to get in front of people.
Yeah.
So it doesn't just live for a week. That thing is still online.
Forever.
Right. And when you sponsor the show, that sponsorship keeps earning you money because those shows don't disappear. They don't go anywhere. They're always out there on YouTube, on the net, and when you do that, your brand's going to be there. We're offering like a commercial break during the show, a watermark bug during the show.
So it doesn't matter if people are watching it on YouTube; they're gonna see your business, and also people that listen to the audio podcast through iTunes, they're going to hear about you as well.
And let me end by saying this: we are not pricing this to get rich. We are not quitting our day jobs. Any of us, we're not. We're not going to be pocketing funds. We are literally saying what we'd like to do is be able to run this show at a high quality. Without having to have it come out of our pockets. That's all we desire because we love doing this. It's
a labor of love.
It is. And it has been for the past couple of years, but in a good way. We don't resent it or anything.
No,
but,
happy to do it.
But this is just opportunities. We feel like goodness, if a show like Batterson's it'll be 2 years ago, 2 years, 3,500 times that your brand could be there in front of people and will continue to live on, goodness, for years to come.
So you can sow a seed.
Yeah.
Sow a seed.
Please
another way you can support our show that's not going to cost you a dime and it's only going to take you a minute, 60 seconds, is if you have an iPhone, go on the podcast app, subscribe to the Techology Show. Even if you're not going to listen to it, download the episode. That helps our algorithm. I have no idea what that means, but it helps it. Also, you can go on iTunes, give us a rating, give us a review, and
we want your help, and I think our listeners will appreciate this. We want your help to overtake Joel Osteen as the number one theology podcast.
That's right.
We want to be there.
Yes.
We want Joel Osteen's spot.
Hey, Heath, real quick, just quickly, kind of hit the highlights here about books, people we've interviewed, and what we have links on our website too.
Man, we've had a great run here, a lot of great guests. We had Matthew DePrez on. You can go to joingenerations.com, sign up, and get his new book. It's an ebook. Get it absolutely free about intergenerational ministry. Last week we talked about 40daybible.com, which is the partnership between the Wesleyan Church and Biblica for the Lenten season next year to have the community Bible experience. Again, that's 40daybible.com. You can also go to 40daybible.com/the Wesleyan Church. We'll have links in our show notes to all those videos. Again, we've got Mark Batterson coming up. We're going to be giving away a copy of his book, All In. And today, we're getting ready to interview the author of The Healthy Church, Dr. Bob Whitesel. We're giving away a Kindle version of that. And if you're too impatient, you can't wait to try to win the Kindle version. Today at WPH Online, Wesleyan Publishing House, WPHonline.com. They've got the Healthy Church for 50% off. And so, I highly, highly recommend this book. We're reading it. Our board is reading it as a church. So, Tony, take it away into our interview.
Yeah, our guest today is Dr. Bob Whitesel. Dr. Whitesel is a founding professor of Wesley Seminary at Indiana Wesleyan University and current professor of missional leadership. He's an accomplished speaker, author, and church consultant. Fuller Theological Seminary has awarded him the Donald McGavern Outstanding Scholarship and Church Growth Award. He's married to his college sweetheart, Rebecca. He's father of 4 daughters and a grandfather of 4. Bob, welcome back to the show.
Hey, good to be here with you, Tony.
Always great having you. I think this is the second, third, or fourth time we've interviewed you in one way or another. I was telling you in the pre-show that, and you've written like 11 or 12 books. I've had the privilege of reading 3 of them, and this was the 3rd book that I read. And really kind of a different feel from the other 2 books that I read. And we want to talk about the healthy church. Behind every worthy endeavor is a question, and that's why. So let's begin by, what are the seeds that germinated and took root and birthed this book?
Well, really, this book and the one before it, Cure for the Common Church, were really the culmination of 20-some years of consulting, of saying, what are the critical things that churches need to be addressing? There are so many programs out there. There's so many good books. But what are the 4 major systems that a healthy church has working right? And so what I did is I put those into Cure for the Common Church. I said, here are the 4 healthy systems. You have to have health in health to grow a church. And then in this book, I said, let's look into exercises that would develop those 4 healthy systems. What are the things the church leaders and a church can do that will help strengthen those 4 areas? We're doing too much stuff that doesn't deal with spreading the good news to people. We're doing too much stuff that's taking just care of our own sheep. And so this book is designed to show, here are the 4 major areas that you need to work on, and here are some exercises to get your church working on them.
Dr. Whitesel, I really appreciate this book because the church I pastor, we're currently a developing church. And we are moving toward, in our denomination, you move from developing church status to established church status. So this book is perfect for us. There's a quote from the Mayo Clinic in your book that you start with, and it says this: imagine that a new wonder drug has been created. It will help prevent illness and disease and help you lose excess weight and keep it off. It will slow the aging process, give you energy and increase your self-esteem, reduce stress, fight depression and anxiety. Now imagine that this drug doesn't cost a penny. It's exercise. And as we've gone through the book, this is an exercise-intensive book. So why so much emphasis on doing the suggested exercises that you list?
Boy, that's a good question. Here, and you sounded just like Oprah when you were sharing that. That was great, man. Man, I love this. The thing is that I found in most churches, they mentally understand they gotta grow in these areas, but they don't know where to start. They don't know what could I do to start moving in this direction. And I usually tell them there's 2 things you can do. One is you can start preaching on it. What I've found in churches is that pastors pretty much still have control of what they preach in the sermon. I mean, there's a lot of pastors, some churches you don't have much control, but mostly pastors have control of what's in the sermon. I say, start preaching on these 4 topics. And number 2, I say, work with your newcomer ministry. Your newcomer ministry is usually a small ministry that you can change its direction pretty easily. It's hard to change the whole Sunday school program. It's hard to change the whole organization of church, but you can work on the assimilation ministry. And then the third thing I said is then get the whole church doing some exercises, doing some exercises that are fun, but that they help you focus on these 4 domains, the 4 domains of church health. And if you don't have these 4 domains, my friend Nelson Searcy calls them the systems, the 4 health systems. If you don't have those working for your church, if you've got 2 of them working and 2 of them not working, you're just going to plateau. If you got just 1 of them working, you're going to decline. If you got 3 of the 4 working, you're going to have a little bit of growth and you're going to be steady little growing. But when you see these churches that just phenomenally grow overnight, and I've got some clients that, 2 years ago they were 500, now they're at 1,500. And as you look at what they're doing, all 4 of these systems are working. And so what I did is all these years I just had to put down these 4 systems in one book and say, here are the 4 areas of health. And that was in the cure for the common church. Basically, the common church is declining, so it's only operating in one of these 4 areas. And I said, let's define those 4 areas. And then people came to me and they said, man, we need some place to start in these 4 areas. How do we begin to get the church reaching out to non-church goers? I said, okay, let me poll my students, my colleagues from all around the world, and let me ask them, what's your best exercise that you give churches to do to help them develop in these 4 areas? And I got hundreds of exercises, and I went through them all and picked the best 4 or 5 for each chapter. So there's 7 chapters, and each chapter has 4 or 5 in each chapter. So about 35 different exercises that are beginning exercises start growing in these 4 areas.
So real quick, for if people have not read Cure for the Common Church yet, what are the 4 areas that you're speaking about? Real quick.
Yeah, well, and they're real simple. First is grow out. You have to stop looking inward. And we all know that. Every pastor knows that. But how do they start doing that? I say, number 1, start preaching about it. Start preaching about ministering to non-church goers. Start telling your congregants about reaching out to non-church goers. Number 2, in your assimilation or newcomer ministry, start focusing on newcomers, people who don't go to church. Reach out to them, take care of them, coddle them, introduce them to the history of the church, to the leaders in your church. Focus on that. Number 3, do some of these exercises that get you connected with people outside the church. One of the exercises in the book is you cancel Sunday morning service. You bring everybody to church, you get ready to go, and you say, hey, everybody, we're going to do something new today. We're going to do an exercise reaching out. We want you to go out in the community and just find someone out in the community. Doesn't matter if they go to church or not, but probably if they're not in church this morning, they're not regularly going to church, and do something in Christ's name for them. And don't tell them you're doing it for Christ, or don't tell them you're doing it because of church. Just do it out of goodness of your heart. And if they ask you why, Sally, it's just I just want to help people. And then come back next Sunday. We're going to have testimonies of what people did by going out. And I do this with my clients. And the problem is we spend all of our time, all the staff spends 40 hours a week working on Sunday service. And that's not going to grow a church. That's going to kill a church. Because it means that 90% of your time is ignoring the outside people. So that's number 1, grow out. Number 2 is grow small. And that means that churches that are healthy, actually their main focus is their small groups. They're known as small group churches more than musical churches, evangelistic churches. When I analyze churches, I go to churches that have great worship ministries, and yet they're plateaued, even declining. And the reason is that worship wasn't designed by God to grow a church. Worship was designed to grow Christians. But to grow the church with non-church goers, it has to take that worship encounter outside the church. This is what Wesley did when he went out and had services in fields near Bristol in England. So number 2 is you have to have these small groups where people really grow, and that has to be the focus. Number 3 is you have to focus on learners. You don't focus on attendance. You focus, are the people in the church saying this is a teaching church? This is a church where I'm learning. It's not about how many people you got or how popular you are. Are people saying we're learning something? Matthew 28:19, Great Commission says, make learners. And finally, and this is the most important thing, make an environment for spiritual transformation, a place where people can be converted. That is the key to healthy churches. My good friend Chuck Hunter, you asked me this question early in the pre-show, Tony. You said Chuck Hunter said that George Hunter, who wrote The Contagious Congregation, Celtic Evangelism, and others, he said that the church health, it doesn't necessarily lead to church growth. And he and I disagree because we define church health and growth differently. He defines church health as the way it's defined by natural church development programs and things like that, in which it just tries to get that systems working well and ignores conversion. And I define church health. You can't have a healthy church without conversion, because that's the most important thing Christ came to do. So those are the 4 areas. Took a little bit longer than I wanted, but I want to make sure that was clear to your hearers.
That's fine. And I was in a conference with him, and I remember him being critical of natural church development, but I couldn't remember that piece. But because that doesn't concentrate on any kind of evangelism per se. It is simply looking at just the temperature of the church.
Yeah, and it does talk about evangelism, but it's like just one part. And really, the evangelism or conversion, spiritual transformation, is the heart of any church. In fact, the healthy churches have a reputation in town as being the place where you go if you need to change. And so that's what our churches should be known for. Not known for the great music, not known for the great preaching. To be frank, a lot of Wesleyan churches are known for great preaching, and that's good. But if it's known for great preaching, I tell them that's not enough. It's got to be known for great conversions. And so the preaching should lead to transformations. I want people, when they need to change, not to turn on Dr. Phil, nothing wrong with Dr. Phil, not to turn on Oprah. I want them to say, I need to go to church, and that church in town is where you go if you need to change your life. Now, that is what I think Christ demonstrated in his earthly ministry, that you went to Christ because you needed to change. And this is what the church needs to reflect.
So let's do this. Let's jump into the exercises. You have 7 in this book. Just briefly name them, and then there may be times we will interrupt and interject, or we might have a question, but just go ahead and start going through this list for us.
Hey, I'm a professor. I'm used to talking for a couple hours at a time. So if you want to stop me, you'll have to interrupt. So that's cool, man. I'm used to that. Basically I said, and within those 4 areas of grow out, grow small, grow learners, and grow newness, and by newness I mean conversion, spiritual and physical transformation, there are a bunch of exercises. One is the church's tribe. How do you reach out to people of different cultures, of different ages and generations, but still have them all feel like they're part of one congregation? So I have a bunch of unity building exercises. This is important for churches that are divided. Another area of exercises is the church as a safe haven. How do we make the church a place where people are hurting say, I can go there and they're not going to condemn me for my hurt? And frankly, within the holiness movement in history, we've had a lot of times where people didn't feel like it was a safe haven. They felt it was kind of a condemning environment. And so I talk about how do we create exercises to help people be more open to hurting people that are coming. And the third, one of the ones I'm especially finding a lot of people are resonating with is the exercises for creating cultural diversity. Everybody knows we need to be a more diverse church, and that society is becoming more diverse, and the church hasn't kept up. And the reason is because they aren't looking at the right models of church. And I go back to John Perkins. John Perkins is this great man who started a Christian Community Development Association, and he says there's 3 R's. And the 3 R's that churches should be involved in is relocation. They should be doing some of their ministry in the inner city. So these suburban churches that have a food shelf or clothing shelf out in the suburbs, not doing any good because the people in the city aren't coming out to the suburbs to get their food and stuff. You should go and sponsor one right in the middle of town. Redistribution, Perkins said, and this is sometimes I tell churches, I say this is controversial because this is it's about your money. He said that churches, instead of building these big beautiful edifices, should take that money and put that into the urban area and do ministry in the urban city. Sponsor a Wesleyan or a Presbyterian or Methodist church in the inner city. I have a church that one of my a church that I went to, and they had a new church building, and I brought one of my friends from the town, and he said this building, he says this is just offensive to the people, the poor people in this community. Wow. He was from the African American community. I said, why? He said, well, look at the marble wall you have behind the altar. He said, he said, across the street and down 2 blocks, you have people living below the poverty line. He said, they don't want to come here. And everything about this church says, we're not here for you. Yeah. So one of the things I look at is how can we have a multicultural model where we actually share the wealth that God has blessed some people who live in the suburbs with. And then the third R, the most important R for first is relocation, redistribution. The third one is reconciliation. Christ has given us the ministry of reconciliation, and that means bringing people of different cultures together to form one church. And so, we remember that thing we had when we were kids. We have our hands and we say, here's the church, here's the steeple. Sure. Look, open it up, look all the people. I like to say, here's the community of different cultures, and they come together in church. And when you open it up, there are these people of different cultures. I used to do this with my colleague who was African American. He'd use his black hand and my white hand, and we say that's what church should be. But the problem is everybody doesn't know how to start doing that. So I actually have simple steps to move to reach out to a different culture that is nearby your congregation. You're better off reaching a culture that's nearby. So if you have a growing Hispanic community, if you have a growing African American, if you have a growing Asian community, you have a growing economic community. One of my students, he went and looked around his little town. He said, Dr. Whites, we're all white in this town, and our church doesn't have any different culture to reach out to. And I said, hey, there's more than ethnic cultures. There's 5 levels. The United States recognizes 5 levels of social economic culture, and there's dozens of affinity culture. Look around. And he found right down the street, 200 yards from the little Nazarene church that he pastored, was a trailer park. And in that trailer park was a different economic level of people. And he began to go over there and do a Bible study and reach out. And the church then started another service in their community building at the trailer park. And before long, this Nazarene church was actually getting all this publicity in the Nazarene denomination for growing because it had another service, another venue in the trailer park. But there was a culture that the upper middle class Nazarenes at the mother church never saw. So that's what we want to do. Is create more of those multicultural congregations.
Yeah, and before we get off of number 3 here, let me just interject that I've done a lot of reading and that research that comes out of Michael Emerson and his work, Divided by Faith, United by Faith, all these books. I've read about 4 or 5 of them, and one of the things that I'm convinced by reading the research is that diversity doesn't just happen. There's nothing organic about it. The church has to be intentional at this point, or it will not happen.
Exactly. One of the things about the book Divided by Faith, I think that it didn't go into enough analysis. And myself as a missiologist, as I've studied these experiences, people often say 10:30 is the most divided hour. In fact, people credit that to Martin Luther King Jr., and I actually talk in the book that was actually said before, even before that, years before that. Actually, earlier, you find that quote by Billy Graham. And but Martin Luther King Jr. certainly exemplified it. But the problem is 10:30 is the worship time. And I talk about in this book, there's nothing wrong with having different styles of worship if you're doing it as part of one church. See, I believe you create and in my experience and my research, you create greater unity by having one church run by multiple cultures and multiple worship varieties, rather than trying to have one church where you blend everybody in a combined service.
Yeah.
In fact, when you combine, and I talk about this in the book, I actually talk about 5 models of multicultural churches, and I talk about the best one that supports the 3 R's is an alliance model, where one church has literally 4 or 5 different services of different styles in the same church, and those 4 or 5 different cultures run the church together. You see, we try and create unity in our worship service, and you can't, because in the worship service, the seats face the wrong way. You can't create fellowship in our auditoriums. It just doesn't work. You have to lean over the pews, you turn around. It doesn't work. We need to have 4 or 5 different worship venues emptying out into one big giant fellowship hall. So people can go to 4 or 5 different musical styles and hear the same sermon, and then come together and share and run the church together. So I point out that organizationally you create more unity by running the church together than you do by trying to push people into a blended worship format. Worship, most research shows, needs to be about 15 minutes long. Worship needs to be about 15 minutes long for people to kind of forget what they're doing and move into God's presence. And they do that with the style that they enjoy the most. So if you've got 3 different cultures, you got to have 45 minutes of worship, 15 minutes of traditional, 15 minutes traditional. And then the pastor freaks out because they don't have any time left for the sermon. So the best thing is look at the movie theaters do today. They have one movie theater, but they have 9 or 10 or 12 different movies of different genres playing at the same time, because they know they're going to cover a bigger part of the community that way. Sure. And that's where our churches should be, but it should be one church with different expressions. St. Thomas Church in Sheffield, England is doing this very well, and they call this, we are a church of churches, but they run it together. And so each one of those venues has equal representation on the board because it's run as a partnership or an alliance. This is much better than the mother-daughter church. The mother-daughter church, where you go and plant a daughter church, it doesn't create much redistribution because you're disconnected. You're sending them away. You aren't really staying connected. Most church plants fail because of lack of mentorship, and that lack of mentorship happens because they're planted as a separate entity from the mother church. This way, it's not a mother-daughter relationship. It's a partner relationship. We're co-equals running the church together of different cultures. And if one culture declines in numbers, another culture usually will be rising. So I've had churches that were white that began this alliance model. And as the Anglos declined in community and the African Americans grew, it became an African American church.
Wow.
So
Hey, let me jump in here and just say to people that haven't read this book, one of the things, I'm a stories guy, so I love anecdotal stories that make the point. And with some of the stuff you just said, I mean, you give a great story about a mother-daughter and how that sometimes just doesn't work. And so I would just recommend the book. Not only do you make these points, but you have good stories to back them up, good anecdotal stories that hammer away the point. Let's keep going here. So we have four more exercises. I want to be sure we get through all 7.
Yeah. And another exercise is heart-to-heart groups. Most small groups, as I said, churches that are healthy usually are known for their small groups in the community. Years ago, I wrote a book called Inside the Organic Church, and we'll have to get you some more of those books, Tony, since you've only read 3 of 11 I've written. Inside the Organic Church, I went to a lot of these emerging churches and looked at like 60 of them, but I picked 12. And I noticed that in the healthy, growing ones, the people said the main thing was not the preacher, it was not the music, it was the small groups. And the example was Rob Bell's church when Rob Bell was up in Granville, Michigan. He's a good preacher, known for his preaching. It was when I talked to people, why are you here? And I thought they'd say, well, the preacher's really good. Their main thing was to be a member here at Mars Hill in Granville, Michigan, you have to belong to a small group. You can't be a member unless you belong to a small group. And I said, that's what Wesley required. Those of us who are Wesleyans, we know that John Wesley turned the spiritual tides of England back to God in a very difficult time during the Industrial Revolution. And he did it by, different from Whitfield, is that he knew when people came to Christ, they had to get involved in a small group, and the small group would kind of hold itself accountable to spiritual growth, and a pastor can't do that. So it's often been said that the method of Wesley, which we get Methodism from today, the method was small groups. So I have exercises for how to get your small groups, not just doing tasks, not just being a sport team, not just being a Bible study or doing a Sunday school class, but how to get them to intimately begin to share their needs with each other. Now, Wesley legislated this, and I actually give some of these examples in the book. Wesley gave them questions they had to ask. And one of the questions of some of the band meetings, a small group, was they had to ask, what sin are you struggling with this week? And boy, that'll get a group small and intimate real quickly. But he knew if you didn't ask it, they'd never develop that.
Well, and Wesley
so all
said,
of those are in the book.
Yeah, and Wesley said, you can't come to the big meeting unless you go to your small group meeting.
Absolutely. This would be like on Sunday when people come to church, somebody at the door and saying, did you go to Sunday school this week? You didn't? Okay, we just go right back home and think about what you did. and boy, that would drive up Sunday school attendance. Wesley knew the small group attendance was more critical than a big event meeting.
Yeah.
And in fact, Whitfield, who was kind of like his rival, they were friends, they were kind of rivals. Whitfield didn't stress small groups. And later in his life, when he was near death, Whitfield said that his fruit didn't remain, but Wesley's did, because Wesley stressed small groups. And so today, if I would tell a pastor, if you're coming to a church and you think you're going to be there 5 years and then you're going to probably get moved on, then that 5 years, you get the people more intimate in their small groups. And then when you leave, they will still be close. If you just focus on worship, then when you leave, the worship leader will leave and you'll be starting over. You focus on preaching, you'll leave, it'll be over. Stop focusing on preaching worship. it's more important in small groups is the key. Now, there's some other ones. I'll get through those. The exercises for creating encounter in worship. Too often, the worship degenerates into performance, and the worship leaders are up there trying to sound like the CD.
Yeah.
And I give exercises about encounter. One I learned at Doug Padgett's church is they would do what they call worship improvisation. You come to church, and they have a sermon ready, and you have 4 songs, and you have special music, and you have a scripture, and you have somebody that's going to lead in prayer. But then they don't decide who's going to go first. They just come to church with all those elements ready, and people ready to lead each element, and they just wait to see who'll start. And when I was at Doug Padgett's church, the bass player started playing a worship song. And then after that was over, there was just quiet, and people reflected, and then a gal got up and shared the scripture. Then the piano player started their song. And it just made everybody real sensitive to the Holy Spirit. I was saying that in one of my classes, and one of my seminary students here at Wesley Seminary, he's a pastor in a Friends church. And he said, Dr. Whitesel, he goes, the Friends have been doing that for years.
Yeah. That's what we've been talking about in the chat room as this conversation is going on, is those kind of services like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
hey, Bob,
I
when I read that part of your when I read that part of your book, I thought, wow, for us control freaks, we'd have to be like in 10 of those services before we kind of relaxed and began to worship.
Yeah. You know, the thing in the past is that the control freaks, we kind of encouraged control in leadership at churches. And as professor of missional leadership, as I study leadership, and you study it historically, strong control only works in crises. When you have large crises going on, that's when strong control. Most of the time, unless there's a major crisis, it works better by a team-led environment where, like Jesus did, he poured himself into 12 others. And a pastor pours himself into 12 others who then pour themselves into 12 and into 12 or into 10, or like the Jethro principle into 10. But I have a couple more exercises. I'll just get to these last 2 quickly for you so you can ask some more questions. But exercises for engaging the community, exercises for serving the community. This is an area that churches just don't know how to serve the community. And one of the things we talk about doing is how to notice needs in the community. So one of the churches went out, and they were supposed to go out, and they were supposed to notice 5 needs in the community and write those down and come back and bring those, going to share those at church. So they had a testimony time at church where people shared 1 or 2 of their 5. And one of the biggest things came that right down the street was a house that the lawn wasn't mowed, hadn't been mowed for a long time, hadn't been painted for a long time. And there was a widow, a poor old widow lady who lived there. And people brought this up, and the trustees of the church decided to go down and paint her house. And it was just a service to the community. But these are exercises. And finally, the most important exercise is how to create exercises so your church is a place where people are being converted, where people are being spiritually transformed. You know, you can do all this other stuff, reach out, have great worship, have cultural diversity. If it's not a place where people are coming to a saving relationship with Jesus Christ, it's not fulfilling the most important part of evangelism. Evangelism is not conversion. Conversion is part of evangelism. Evangelism means good news. And good news is the whole process of introducing people to Christ, helping them find their spiritual gifts. But the most important part is conversion. And people shy away from that word today because in parts of the world there's forced conversions, even in Christian circles sometimes. And so I think it's better to talk about transformation. Our churches are a place where if you want to change, you go to that church. That's a healthy church.
Yeah. One of my favorite things about this book is, somebody may be watching this or listening to this and like, well, that may be good. This may work in a large church, but that wouldn't work in our church. And your last chapter is about customizing all of these exercises for one's own local church. So tell us why you did that and why is that important, and how could these be used in a church of 500 or a church of 50?
Sure. I made the book because to help my clients, and my clients range in size from like Vineyard in Cincinnati, which is probably about 7,000, on down to little churches in North Carolina or Georgia that are 60 or 70. And so I wanted to have exercises that anybody could do. So I threw out all the exercises that only a big organization could do, and I picked just the ones that, regardless of size, you could do. But the real key is that people who are reaching out with these exercises, they need some time during the year to focus on their exercise plan. If you're doing exercise plan and you go to the gym and you work with a trainer and the trainer says, okay, you should do this, you should do this and this, and then they follow up with you. So I said, what if we did that at a retreat? I've gone to a lot of retreats, church retreats, and most of them, I hate to be so frank, but most of them are pretty lame. They hire me to come to a church retreat and they say, let's hear from this guy for the whole weekend. And nothing changes at the church because it's just a bunch of talking heads at the retreat.
Yeah.
I said, what if the retreat about this?
Hey, Bob, time's getting away, but there's one question. When I was reading this book, it's a workbook, and really it's a workbook. And I had the thought, number one, this is great, the way that Bob walks churches through this, but then automatically I could just name some pastors and lay people that would absolutely be threatened by this, because there is a lot of reflection that's going on and a lot of really evaluating the ministry of a church inside and out. What do you think for some, why is there that hesitation and sometimes, almost a rejection of something like this?
Well, some of the research has shown that pastors go into the ministry because of poor self-image and feel like being a pastor or a church leader makes them kind of a mini celebrity, a person that people look up to. And we get threatened when people don't look up to us or critique us. But what we see is that as we grow and mature in ministry, we see that those critiques are some of the most helpful things that we get. Mm-hmm. And they help us really in the future have a more satisfying ministry. So each one of these chapters, I started out by saying, here's why this topic of this chapter is so important. Like you said, I tell a narrative, a true story about someone, about how they experienced that chapter's topic. And then I give them examples of how Christ taught on each one of those topics, whether it be why we should be culturally diverse or why we should build teams or what the importance of encountering God. I use stories from the Bible. But I want to help churches see that getting input and growing and focusing on these areas is not really hard, and it's really wonderfully enjoyable once the church starts to move in these. I was a pastor in not a senior pastor, but associate pastor in a large mega church that grew from about 750 up to about 4,000 in 4 years, and it was one of the most exciting times. And we were doing these things. I didn't even know it at the time. I was trying to figure out what was happening, and that's when I began my first doctorate, was to study what was going on. But it's one of the most enjoyable times because the Spirit of God is moving, and sometimes you don't even know why. So I set down this book to say, in the churches that are growing, here's why. They're working on these things. And if you start working on these things, you'll start getting that health, and people start coming, and it's this wonderful, beautiful environment of God's movement. And so I tell pastors, regardless of the challenges you have to overcome to do it, it's worth it to get there.
Listen, there may be someone that watches this podcast or listening now that would maybe want to contact you for consulting or take a look at the books you've written. Where's a good place on the internet they can find you?
Sure, bobwhitesel.com. BOBWHITESEL, just one L.com. All the books are there. I actually don't sell the books myself. I link you to the online site where they're usually going for the cheapest. And so you just click on that, and that'll take you to the online site. And consulting, I also do missional coaching. I actually coach people who want to be consultants and consult for churches, but in a much more postmodern, today's environment of coaching. And in addition to that, I take trips once a year. Anybody's interested, to England to study the life and the leadership of John Wesley. Because, if there's anybody who made a bigger impact, probably next to Christ over through history, it was Wesley. And it was because this method. And the method was really based on a guy who said, we need to grow the church in a healthy manner. Yeah. And here's the method to do that. And that's why we have so many Methodists all over America and every little town today as a result of that legacy.
Bob, thank you so much for taking time out of what we know is a very busy schedule. Blessings on you, and I'm sure that we'll talk again in the future.
Hey, Tony, Heath, Matt, good talking to you. Don't forget, today they're offering my book at Westland Publishing House for half price, just in honor of the show.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yep.
All right. Later, Bob.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Hey, that's WPHonline.com. His book, The Healthy Church, is $750 there. That's just for today. This is Tuesday, October 22nd, 2013. And also today, you can go to, after the show, thetechologyshow.com/giveaway, and we're giving away a copy of the Kindle version of The Healthy Church. Dude.
And speaking of the Kindle version, if you go to thetechologyshow.com/shop, you can find the Kindle version. It is also the same price as the hard copy right now on Amazon.
Oh, so, yes. Yeah. They did when the book first came out. They did a sale, and I got the ebook version for like dirt. No, you know what? I got it for free. They did something. I don't know. It wasn't illegal.
Listen, guys,
what I did.
Next week. Yeah, next week we have Evan Money on. Matthew, why don't you go ahead and just play just a little clip of the documentary he's working on?
Sure.
I don't remember the day that you left. I just remember more room to play hide and seek in Mom's closet. But on the day I learned you wouldn't be returning, I hung a noose around Disney Romance. Watch its last breath kick the air while it hoped for some part of me to still believe that this paperweight heart could hold down a man.
Words are very powerful. Words can be healers and slayers.
I have a dream.
He used words to speak to the conscience of a nation.
Words have a tremendous emotional impact.
The clearest God ever spoke to me. He said, "This is what I want you to do for the rest of your life."
What's really important is being able to have a connection with your message and to convey that connection.
He would get on stage and he would love people. When people saw that message communicated in love, it would change everything.
Some people do really find fault like there's a reward for it. They really do.
When God releases a flood of his power, nothing will be able to stop it.
I rap because I feel like that's the easiest way to get my message through.
I love the personal challenge of moving people.
Sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Oh, yes, they will.
Get excited for that one, guys. Now it's time for They Said It.
Read my lips.
I'm going to say this again.
I've never taken steroids or HGH.
I took the initiative in creating the internet.
The Macintosh, of all the machines I've ever seen, is the only one that meets that standard.
Well, I'm not a crook.
If you know what you're doing here, slide out.
If you thought the tablet growth spurt might be fading, you should think again. The latest numbers from Gartner show tablet sales skyrocketing an estimated 53.4% this year to 184 million units from 120 million units in 2012. And the woebegone desktop category continues to struggle, exhibiting an 8.4% decline year over year to 303 million units shipped from 341 million for last year. Tech writer Barb Darrow, who goes on to say, the market across all devices is driven by a shift to lower cost devices, according to Gartner. Source Gigome.
Mega church pastor Mark Driscoll claims that his books were confiscated at the Strange Fire conference put on by another mega church pastor, John MacArthur. Sarah Pullman Bailey, Religious News Service national correspondence reporter on an incident that is receiving national attention. Source, RNS News. Only a couple stories this week, just out of our time here. So, Matthew, you and I have had we've had an ongoing discussion for the last couple of years about what's the future of PCs, and will the tablet overtake the PC? Is the PC era dead? So what do you think? I mean, these numbers here, obviously.
So the reason this is happening today, probably new iPads.
Yes.
Surface 2 you can order. Nokia's put out their Windows tablet. I watched a review on that actually this morning. Looks like a pretty nice device. I mean, I just got to be honest. It's kind of weird.
What was the device you just said?
Nokia. They've got a Windows 8.1 tablet that they just released. Yeah,
gotcha.
It's a pretty little device. What do I think the future is? I don't know. I know for myself, like what I'm doing right now. What does this look like to do what we're doing on a tablet? It's impossible for one, but we absolutely couldn't. But I do think that in like regular day-to-day stuff, when I look at my mom and dad, like I feel like if they got a hold of a tablet, they wouldn't even use a laptop anymore, except for formatting a bulletin. I still feel like they'd probably have an easier time on that. But it's an exciting time to live in. That's what I can say. It is really exciting.
One of the things that my nephew Eli up here, he goes to school at Lombard High School in Carroll Stream, and next year the seniors will all get iPads. And so on questioning him about that last night, he says what's pushing it is they want to get textbooks on the iPad as opposed to carrying a big old backpack around.
Right.
So, I mean, with the tablet, there are use case scenarios that the computer just can't do. Now, you could get a laptop computer, but the point is that it's one thing to carry a laptop computer. It's a totally different thing to have a tablet computer that looks like just a little notebook that you can just carry around easily. And with the iPad, Matthew, I think you and I have had the same experience that we've been able to play around with other tablets, but I mean the iPad, I'll get 4 or 5 days off a charge on that thing.
It's incredible. Do you remember? I was thinking about this when we were talking about like the future of cheaper devices. Do you remember your ePC? How long did you have that? The little what were those even called? Now I can't remember.
It was Asus ePC.
Right, but what was that? What was that line of computers called? The little tiny ultra cheap.
Oh,
netbooks. Netbooks.
Yeah.
Oh. I mean,
goodness.
Let's go back to those days. It's really, I mean, they were ahead of their time, guys.
Let me ask you this: like, I know a lot of people who have iPad. I know several who have either like the Kindle, just regular Kindle, or the Kindle Fire. Know a ton of people who have like the little, I guess it's Android tablets that go from $100.
The kind you can buy at CVS.
Yeah, right. But do you know anyone?
Dude, I've worked on one. I had somebody give me a brick that they'd gotten for their child to fix up. Oh my word, $100 CVS tablet.
But do you know anyone who owns a Surface, a Microsoft Surface?
I don't personally.
No,
I don't either.
I know one person.
Really?
Can you share their?
I actually do. I know one person. I got to play with it. You're gonna think I'm crazy, Heath. So like next year I'll be able to upgrade from a phone. I can tell you this, that if the iPhone doesn't get wider, next year it'll be the year that I get off of iPhone.
Why?
You heard it here first, folks.
Conclusion that I will do an Android because I love the Windows Phone operating system. It's silent.
It's hard for me.
Dude,
I never
just
knew
wait,
you.
because you're gonna like. I'd love to see you make that switch, Tony. I would love to see it.
Mark it down, October 22nd. Tony said the dumbest thing ever on the Techology Show. Speaking of the dumbest thing ever, our other story.
Oh no, that's
hold on.
Man. You can't do that. Heath, you're fired. Okay, we're pulling your contract. Okay. I have this story in here, and I want to be really careful because I can be very guilty of the thing I'm going to criticize right now.
Yes.
I just found this regrettable. If you don't know the inside scoop on this, we give you the link. You can follow the story. John MacArthur had this conference, the Strange Fire Conference.
He wrote the
MacArthur,
book.
you know that
he wrote the book called Strange Fire, and then did the conference on it.
Yeah, and he's been very critical of the charismatic movement, and there's a lot to criticize about the movement, to the point where he just avoids. He's just all these gifts and all these kind of things that we see Paul talking about. He's willing to just say they were for that century. They're not for now. It was for the early church. Driscoll is of a differing opinion, and I find myself in the argument leaning towards Driscoll, but he shows up at the conference uninvited. He comes with a bunch of his books, and his books are he's taking issue with MacArthur's book, Strange Fire, and they confiscate his books. And my regret for this, you guys already know, I talked about it in the pre-show. My regret is you can debate this all day long in Christian circles, but don't crash a conference.
Yeah. And he actually... in the article that you linked to, there's a picture of, I think it's Mark Driscoll's back and the security guard kind of confronting them. Mark Driscoll's like, hey, we want to give these out as gifts. So they're like, hey, all the books here must be approved. So they took them up to the office. And from what the article says, there was about 4,000 people at this conference. It was pretty well.
Yeah, that was a pretty audacious thing to do. And I'll flip the... I'll flip the gears here because I know that similar things have been attempted at Mars Hill by groups where somebody with a differing opinion has stood outside the church and would do something like that. And I promise you, they have done the exact same thing that he had happen to him to people who have been there.
Good point.
For their stuff. And so, I mean, you shouldn't think that it's out of the realm of reasonability for what happened to happen. Dude, you do it yourself.
Right. Heath, MacArthur's conference had some big hitters. R.C. Sproul, Johnny Erickson, Tata. Big name people. So,
all right. I definitely want to. I read a little bit. I think it was, they were live streaming it. So I read several blogs about MacArthur's statement or his opening remarks. And I think that the biggest critique that I've seen of his opening remarks so far online, other than the fact that, some blogs and some organizations just asked him not to even do this conference, but was that he really didn't get into specifics. Like, he was very general in his critiques sometimes. And, but yeah, I mean, this is one of those things. I mean, what kind of hill are you going to die on?
It's just regrettable.
Yes.
The church doesn't need press like this. And
No.
And I feel like that Driscoll forced it. Hey, real quick now, Heath, just talk about the next 2 weeks, our two guests, and then TG, just for the sake of time, I do want you to just hit real quick the November 12th and talk a little bit about that.
So we showed you the clip to Word of Art, which is a documentary coming out by Evan Money. We're going to be talking with him next week, talking about that. Looks to be a great documentary. And then on November 5th, we're so excited. We're going to be playing our interview with Mark Batterson about his new book, All In, which if you go to thetechnologyshow.com/shop, you can pick up from Amazon. Don't forget, joingenerations.com. Don't forget all that. TG, another great guest we're having coming up November 12th.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'm distracted. I'm reading the term. Yes. November the 12th, Aaron Stewart, he's one of the co-creators, I believe, of Planning Center, which is a really cool worship and service planning and scheduling people, scheduling volunteers for your church services. Planning Center online is where you can go to look into it ahead of time. Just a great, useful amazing application.
Yep.
We've been using it now for the past 2 months at Golden Grove. They are generous in that smaller churches, you can have a account for up to 10 people, and they don't charge you for it.
Yeah.
And then your bigger churches, you can buy packages for it. Very cool application. And if getting people coordinated on the same page is an important thing for you and your church, if you're like us and you like your worship services organized and not
you're control freak.
and you don't like Quaker church services, this is an app for you. This is a service for you, and I'm just excited to get them on. Like, I've been super passionate about it ever since I figured it out. I was like, I had somebody hand me a schedule. I was playing a part in a service, and I had this piece of paper handed to me. I was like, this is amazing. What is this? And I didn't get an answer. Then I went out trying to figure it out on my own. Finally found it, and I'm just pumped about all the stuff that it can do.
Now, you can also, and I know Aaron will talk about this, but Planning Center integrates with ProPresenter. So, like, when we're getting ready to put in all our songs for Sunday, we just pull it in off of Planning Center, and everything's, it's awesome.
It is
awesome.
Very cool application.
All right. Listen, you could do us a big favor out there if you shop on Amazon. If you just go to our website and just click that Amazon button there and start your shopping there. Also, I just wanted to reiterate what Matthew talked about at the opening of the show, that we are now offering sponsorship for our shows. And he's already given a great illustration of when we had Batterson on the first time. We're getting close to 4,000 hits. If you sponsor an episode, that advertisement for you lives on, and so if someone clicks on it 5 years down the road, your watermark is there, all your information is there. If you're interested in sponsoring perhaps Mark Batterson, we're having him in 2 weeks. We have Michael Cusick, which I think would be another great one. We have him December the 17th, or any of our episodes. You can contact me personally, or even better yet, contact Matthew, because he can give you all the details about what you get for that advertising package. All right, Heath, tell our listeners where they can find you.
HeathMulligan.com. I'm Heath Mulligan everywhere. Don't forget today, 50% off, WPHonline.com to buy The Healthy Church.
Yeah. You can find me at MatthewTG.com, where all my contact information is listed there. And Tony, you're AKC64 everywhere on the internet.
That's right.
I wonder what
if you
year
want to
he
do
was
further.
born. Sorry, go ahead.
Gee. Oh, hey, real quick. Going to throw in a second copy of a book because Bob talked about that this book that he gave an interview on today is a sequel to Cure for the Common Church. We're throwing that in with the giveaway next week. So it's 2 Kindle books.
Whoa.
So the technologyshow.com/giveaway.
Yeah. All right, let's close this thing out. This is the roughest landing we've ever had.
If you want to do further research on anything we discussed today, you can find all the links to the stories we covered at our website, thetechnologyshow.com. If you have a question or you want to make a comment, you can always send an email at thetechnologyshow@gmail.com, or better yet, we would love it if you'd give us a call and leave us a message at 3049 Theology. Leave your messages on that machine there, and we may even play it on the air. As always, thanks for joining us. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Peace out.